Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the fauna of Hateg Island. Hateg Island was a large island from what is now Romania. The deposits of interest date to the late Cretaceous, the Maastrichtian stage in particular, and around about 168 to 66 million years ago. The very well-known and renowned paleontologist, geologist, scholar, Albanian spy, adventurer, and aristocrat Franz Nopcsa pioneered and spearheaded much of the early research into the fauna of Hateg Island. Based on what we know today, Hateg Island was about 80,000 square kilometers or roughly 31,000 square miles. This is about the same size as the island of Hispaniola in the West Indies. The overall climate of Hateg was semi-humid and subtropical, with strong seasonality, showing a distinct wet and dry seasons, with monsoonal rains being the prevailing force in the wet season. Carbon isotopes suggests a dry forest condition, which is peculiar, as despite the semi-humid subtropical climate and the dry forest conditions, the majority of the plant fossils from Hateg indicate a more tropical floral composition. Whilst tropical plants can indeed survive in similar conditions today, in order to do so, they need access to water on an annual basis. And on the island of Hateg, this came in the form of several braided rivers and lakes, which would have been, in particular for the lakes, perennial and there all year round. The environments within Hateg included floodplains, forests, braided rivers and lakes as discussed, as well as beaches, wetlands and much more. The island of Hainan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, in China today is the closest counterpart in terms of climate and topography to that of Hateg. However, it is still markedly different in terms of fauna and flora. This is a size comparison chart of some, not all, of the fauna from Hateg Island and will be one of the key components throughout the rest of this presentation. This art was done by Joshua Kanapi. So, we reach our first group, Avialian theropods, of which there are three key species to talk about. Bala is a large bird that was originally thought to be a dromaeosaur when it was first discovered, based on the fact that it has two large toe claws on its feet, including the classic circle claw of a raptor. However, more recently it has been found to be a bird. A number of features tell us it's a bird, but more interestingly, a number of features suggest that it might not be a carnivore. In particular, the absence of a third finger and the swept back, enlarged and widened pubis bone of the pelvis would suggest an area for large gut, and the loss of the third finger would suggest that the fingers became less important and the hands became less important in procuring prey. The double sickle claws consist of the first toe, or the hallux, and the second toe of the foot. Both of them were not necessarily raised off of the ground. The first toe was actually Bala seems to have re-evolved a function for the first toe, in that it was a weight support apparatus. Basically, it was there to aid in weight support. The second toe, the more classical raptor-esque toe, its function is still unknown. It's probably used in a variety of different ways. Next up is Gargantuarus. Gargantuarus was a large flightless bird that could have been found all across the European archipelago at this time. Its most noticeable or most noteworthy place of discovery would be the large island, which consisted of Portugal, Spain, France, Austria, Hungary, and parts of Belgium, which was the largest island in the archipelago. It's where things like Variraptor and Arcovinator come from. Those species, or that particular species, was about the same size as a cassowary or ostrich. However, the fossil material that comes from Hateg shows that the Hateg gargantuarus was much smaller, about the size of a goose in comparison. This animal may or may not be gargantuarus. If it is gargantuarus, it's its own species. If it isn't, it's a distinct but closely related genera. Not much is known about the diet of gargantuarus, but we assume it's probably an herbivore based on its classification. Its leg bones show us that gargantuarus and its relatives were actually pretty poorly adapted for running. They were graviportal, which tells us they had pretty strong, sturdy legs, but not very skilled at reaching high speeds. Think like a Galapagos tortoise, perhaps, in that sense, though obviously much faster metabolism and much more active. The Hateg and Tantornithine, or there might even be two of them, that's more than two of them. The largest one is about the size of a pigeon. They were both capable of flight. Diet is unknown, but they're probably either omnivorous or insectivorous. From Hateg, there is a large nesting colony of Entantornithines known that became drowned when I believe it was a lake, burst its banks and flooded the surrounding area and flooded the banks, drowning a whole nesting colony of these birds with it. Most of the fossils consist of thousands of eggs and eggshells with some skeletal material as well. Now, despite Ballard not being a dromaeosaur, there are dromaeosaur remains from Hateg. They're just not complete enough to be assigned to a species. There are three general specimens. There is a large ungual specimen, as you can see in the picture below. This ungual is roughly about the same length as the toe claw found on Velociraptor. There are velociraptorine teeth, which you can see in the other picture next to it, scale bar there, 3 millimeters. And then there's the wastebasket taxon Megalosaurus hungaricus, which is represented by a tooth. This tooth might either be a tyrannosaur or an abelisaur. Now, whilst tooth scaling is not reliable, Megalosaurus hungaricus, could either be a dromaeosaur, tyrannosaur, or abelisaur. Tooth scaling is not reliable, but taking all of this into account, including the claw, the teeth, and some other piece of evidence, these all indicate a dromaeosaur of around 2 meters or more in length, so about the same size as a velociraptor. Here you can see it edited on to the size comparison by Joshua Kanapi, scaled to roughly equivalent size of Megalosaurus hungaricus, so around 2.7 meters long, based on the Theropod Encyclopedia by Larramendi and Molina Perez. Next up is Allodaposuchus precedens. Now, this big boy was one of the dominant predators on the island, I would imagine. It is up to 3 meters long. It would have superficially resembled the modern-day black caiman and maybe an American alligator to a lesser extent. It was one of the larger Allodaposuchid crocodiles, definitely carnivorous despite potential close relations to the weird and herbivorous Halaeocampsidae. They are basal Eusuchians, which means they are part of the same branch of Pseudotsuchia, which encompasses our modern crocs. It is by mass the second largest predator on the island, only a few kilograms to maybe 100 kilograms lighter than Hatzegopteryx, the biggest predator. Allodaposuchus precedens and other species of Allodaposuchus are found on the other islands around Europe at this time as well, which actually suggests a tolerance, or at least an ability to tolerate salt water for a period of time to allow it to travel between these islands. It would have been a carnivore, would have probably eaten fish, turtles, the smaller pterosaurs, and small to medium dinosaurs, as well as smaller crocodiles that were living on Hateg at the time. Struthiosaurus Transylvanicus is one of 3 main Struthiosaurus species that can be found throughout Europe during the Maastrichtian stage across the multiple different islands. Despite coming from one of the smaller islands, Hateg, it is actually the largest of all of the known species of Struthiosaurus, reaching about 3 meters in length and potentially exceeding 300 kilograms in mass. That makes it about the same length as a female Nile crocodile and the same weight as a large grizzly bear or a female polar bear. Much like most other ankylosaurs, it would have had a pretty generic diet of ferns, horsetails, and other low-lying ground vegetation. We do have a partial brain case of one of the smaller species, Struthiosaurus ostracus, which you can see next to the picture there. That art piece is a reconstruction as well of that species. Either way, this would have probably been one of the tougher things on the island. Definitely an interesting animal. Next, we get to the Rhabdodonts. Rhabdodonts are a type of weird ornithopod. We don't really know where they truly sit. I think they're a bit more derived than iguanodontians, if I remember correctly, than the other iguanodontians anyway, but that's going off topic. There are 3 genera spread across those 3 genera there are 4 species, 3 of which are Zalmoxes, 1 of which is unnamed. But there are 2 named species of Zalmoxes, Zalmoxes robustus and I'm not going to pronounce that. The adult size of robustus is 2.5 meters long. However, the other species is only known from a subadult individual, and that specimen is the same size as adult Zalmoxes robustus. This is weird. New analyses actually suggest that although previously considered a dwarf, Zalmoxes might not actually be a dwarf at all. Instead, it actually seems far closer to the ancestral size of Rhabdodonts in Europe than, say, Rhabdodon does. And so it might actually just be abnormally small, but not quite a dwarf level. Which calls into question the validity of dwarfism in some of the other species from Hateg. As the name suggests, Zalmoxes robustus is actually quite an abnormally robust animal for its size, but it would have been a good prey source for some of the larger predators like Allodaposuchus precedens, the Hateg Dromaeosaur, and even Hatzegopteryx. Next one is Transylvanosaurus. There's not much to really say about this animal. It's a close relative of Zalmoxes. It's about the same size as Zalmoxes robustus and probably filled a similar niche. Lastly, Rhabdodon priscus. Rhabdodon priscus is a bit of a nightmare. I, for one, believe it's probably a wastebasket taxa because it is found all across Europe at this time and it is all of the same species. And there's a caveat in paleontology, especially vertebrate paleontology, where if something is not distinct enough in its fossil remains from an already known species, it just gets lumped in with that species. And I suspect that's what's happening with Rhabdodon priscus. Individual size varies significantly between specimens. The Hateg specimens are usually around 4 meters long and probably around 250 kilograms. They were once thought to be insular dwarfism, but new evidence suggests they may actually be insular gigantism, which is interesting. They're one of the largest non-sauropod residents from Hateg, and they would probably not had very many predators, and as adults they may have had no predators. The Sauropoda consist of 2 species from Hateg. Megarosaurus, which although is known from 2 species, one valid, one dubious, only one is known from Hateg, that's the valid one. Megarosaurus is probably one of the most well-known species from Hateg, having featured in several documentaries and many news articles for being famous for being a dwarf sauropod. It's around 6 to 7 meters in length. It is a weird offshoot of the litho something, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, of the Titanosauria. It was once considered to be a species of Titanosaurus, when Titanosaurus was still knocking around as a wastebasket taxon before it was all sorted out. Unlike the ornithopods, Megarosaurus and its relative Apollodotitan are confirmed or believed to be confirmed cases of insular dwarfism. These are dwarf animals. It would have weighed anywhere from 750 to 1,000 kilograms in mass, or about a ton, roughly about the same weight as a rhino. And there is a single osteoderm specimen known which might be referable to Megarosaurus, which shows that this animal, like many other titanosaurs of the age, had dermal armor. Apollodotitan is of a similar size to its close relative Megarosaurus. It's only known from one species. It's roughly 6, maybe 7 meters in length as well, just the same sort of length as Megarosaurus, and it's about the same mass as Megarosaurus as well. Whilst osteoderms are not present in Apollodotitan, if they're present in Megarosaurus, chances are they're probably present in Apollodotitan. To round out this brief overview and review of the fauna of Hateg Island, we'll end on Hatzegopteryx. Hatzegopteryx is almost certainly the largest animal to have ever flown. It is a true monster. It is the largest predator on Hateg Island. Compared to many of the other pterosaurs, it has abnormally short and robust neck vertebrae. Its wing bones tell us that despite its robustity and large size, it was still able to fly, as its wing bones are near identical to those of other large asdarchids like Quetzalcoatlus and Quetzalcoatlus. Wingspan estimates vary significantly and vary in reliability as well, depending on source and material you use to scale that off of. But usually estimates fall between the ranges of 10 to 12 meters in terms of wingspan, which is about the same size as a small plane. Weight estimates from a paper by Darren Naish and Mark Whitten in 2017 suggest that these animals could have been around 180 to 250 kilograms. And in the same study, they performed biomechanical analyses on the neck vertebrae of Aramborgiania and Hatzegopteryx. The analysis used failure force analysis on the vertebrae, and the results showed that Hatzegopteryx's neck vertebrae could withstand a force of up to 5 to 10 times its body weight. This obviously doesn't mean that it was actually applying that much force to its neck vertebrae. Even half that force would be very lethal to most of the animals on Hateg Island. The reason for these robust neck vertebrae is a little unclear, but the general consensus at the moment is that they were to support its abnormally large and robust head. Although we have very few skull bones, the skull bones we do have show that its head was probably quite a lot heavier and more robust than most other pterosaurs, most other large asdarchid pterosaurs, that is. It may have also helped in hunting, as the joints between the vertebrae, the articular points, are incredibly large and would have actually functioned as a shock-absorbing device, which may have allowed it to thrust with force forward, maybe stab its beak into something, who knows. But it would have predominantly fed upon small crocodiles, mammals, small reptiles, would have scavenged from the beaches and when larger animals on the island died. It was probably present all across Europe at the time, though at the moment we don't have any evidence to suggest that that would be the case, but given its massive size, how far large birds travel today, and the fact that Aramborgiania might be both found in Jordan and the United States, although that animal probably has a substantially larger wingspan than Hatzegopteryx and Quetzalcoatlus, it wouldn't be wouldn't be questionable to suggest that Hatzegopteryx may have been present across the whole European archipelago at the time. But on Hateg, at least, it was the apex predator. Nothing on Hateg was big enough to consider an adult Hatzegopteryx a food source, and almost everything on Hateg Island was small enough to consider Hatzegopteryx a threat. Yeah, thank you very much. That has been my short, well, not short, it's almost half an hour, presentation on Hateg Island. Hopefully that wasn't too long. Thank you for watching.